Alex, thanks for talking to us. A couple of days now working with your boys and your squad on the training ground. What's going to be the focus as you head towards Saturday?
The focus is going to be on obviously improving in all aspects of the game that we didn't see evidence against Hartlepool. We changed the system for the first time to try and obviously gain more of a foothold in the opposition half of the pitch. We weren't cohesive enough in being able to do that. Rather than that being anything systematic, it was simply more the players weren't at the levels that they need to be at. So over the next couple of days, we're going to think very closely about personnel and obviously tactically in terms of how we can have more of an impact in the Crawley game. We've got ideas on how we're going to do that, and we'll get to work with those both today and tomorrow. So yeah, the bulk of the work will be on obviously improving in all aspects of the game that wasn't evident against Hartlepool.
Is that something that always happens every time you play the game, and you've selected a team and you talk afterwards about looking at systems, looking at personnel? You're going to continue with that to try and get better and better? Yeah,
always, but we are very mindful of the fact that consistency in football is important, and there's been very few personnel changes from week to week with us, and certainly only once have we changed, which was the other night, the tactics in terms of the starting system. So we're striving obviously to get better, but without making wholesale changes. We don't need to make wholesale changes in both personnel and tactically because we're doing okay. Not brilliant, not poorly, we're doing okay at the minute, and obviously the results would suggest that. We know that we've got to be much better in the attacking half of the pitch, but I would imagine another 20 teams in this league would be saying exactly the same. So we're always striving to make those little individual tweaks as well as working with the players obviously on a one-to-one basis to try and ensure that we get better in all areas.
3 home games coming up, 2 in the league, one in the cup. When you've got a little spell of home games, do you view them any differently than you could have possibly been away for 2 successive games the last week? Obviously one was called off, but do you view home games differently to away games?
Yeah, you have to, absolutely you have to. Since football began 150 years ago, I think virtually every team will have had a better home record than the away record in the professional leagues, I'd imagine. And there's a reason for that, obviously, because you have a routine at home, and routine in life as well as in football obviously allows you to be successful, whereas your routine away from home obviously isn't always different compared to who you play against, whether you need to have an overnight stay, whether you travel on the day. You know what you're going to get from a home game in that sense, and also it always helps to have obviously the bulk of your support behind you at home as well, which you don't get away from home. So we're certainly looking to ensure that our home record is a very strong one this year. Really disappointed that we lost to Stevenage, because the message going into that game in the changing room was to make this place a fortress, and we'd managed to obviously navigate through 3 games prior to that at home undefeated. Should have won all 3, drew one of them obviously late on. So yeah, back to winning ways against Crawley, looking then obviously to develop that into the Mansfield game and then into the next league game at home against Mansfield.
You're hard on yourself in terms of what you want from being the manager and what makes you feel better, but 8 league games down the line, only 2 defeats, 10th in the table, 12 points on the board. For the supporters, they'll be fairly satisfied, but you want more.
Yeah, of course, always want more, because my standards are very high, as are Lee Bells and Kenny Luntz and the rest of the staff, and that permeates through to the players. They've got high standards. And you're right, on the face of it, we've got 12 points, only lost 2 out of 8. And obviously we all know that losing games of football became a habit almost on a weekly basis last year. So there's got to be some context. There has this club, when it first came down last time around, finished 19th and 17th and flirted with the bottom 2 places. There was a very real chance at stages during that first season in particular that the club was going to drop out of the Football League. So far, we've been in the top 10 and not left the top 10. Of course, the other night was disappointing. And of course, some second half performances in particular in some games have dropped below the levels that we've set in the first half. But there's plenty to be positive with. We can't be perfect every single week. We're Alexandra and we're going to lose some games of football, but what we're attempting to do this year is ensure that we certainly win more games than we lose. And that means you're always on an upward trajectory, and if you're on an upward trajectory, it's going to place you higher up the league.
The one thing that this football club has always been proud of is bringing their own players through and getting them into first team level. There's 2 or 3 around your first team squad this season. but Charlie Finney's got some minutes under his belt now. How happy are you with his progress?
Really happy. Obviously, you have ideas in terms of when you want to introduce the next crop of young academy graduates into the team. And with Charlie and Joel Taberner in particular, who were in that next group, we thought that their introduction was probably going to come a little bit later than it has, because you get to see over the years in terms of when the best time is to introduce these players through experience of doing it, hundreds of times really with the players that we produced. But Charlie in particular is well ahead of his curve, and now's the time for him. He's going to get plenty of opportunities to impact the game, probably initially from the bench, and he got to work towards, same with Joel Taberner, getting some opportunities then to start games of football. He came on the other night, made his debut and made such a really sound decision in terms of squaring that ball for Dan Aggie for the goal. That belied his years really. It would have been so easy for him to have his eyes lit up by seeing the goal in front of him, wanting to be the hero to score the equaliser, and perhaps tried to dinked it over the keeper. But he didn't, and amongst all the chaos and all the pressures of us trying to get the equaliser, he was able to be sound of thought and square the ball, as I say, for Dan, and that is Charlie. He's really calm, composed and quite clinical with his thinking.
You've dealt with a whole host of these type of players before in your role, and now what you're doing now. What does something like that do for a player when it happened to Charlie Finney on Tuesday night, the assist man?
Yeah, I think it just reinforces for him, not that he needed it, because he'll never lack confidence, just because he's so laid back, rather than having an arrogance. Charlie has got bundles of confidence just because he's so laid back and nothing phases him. But what it does do is just reinforce to him that he's ready, and all the things that he's produced in under 23 football and under 18 football, he knows he can now produce at senior level. So, that's a positive in that sense. And also the positive with him and Joel Taberner is that they're very flexible in terms of the options they offer from the bench positionally. It's not just the fact that we can bring them on in multiple positions. Charlie could play anywhere off the front, he could play as a deep midfielder, he can play as a left back, and we don't see him ultimately as a left back. He's going to be in a position closer to the opposition's goal, we think, long term. But at the minute, that's been his little inroad into the team. That's something that obviously we'll look to try and develop with him.
Well, for the second time this week, Hartlepool are under new management in Port Hartley. You've got Crawley coming there under new management and Kevin Betsy. What's the reports and what are you expecting from Crawley?
Yeah, they've changed a little bit and deviated from what they were earlier on the season. They were heavily possession-based in the first few games. And that didn't generate either the results or the opportunities in front of goal that perhaps they'd have wanted, I'm sure. So it looks like it on the face of it, looking at their games since and the statistics from those games, that they've compromised playing as much build-up football, if you like, and focused a bit more on getting the ball into areas, in the mid-third and the top third of the pitch a bit earlier, and that's obviously had an impact for them. They're off the back of 5 games undefeated now, League and Cup, so they'll certainly be confident coming into the game, and that's only going to be reinforced off the back of winning 3-2 against Stockport the other night. Both coaches that have come from environments at top clubs, and Kevin Betsy and Dan Machichi, and in both cases they've worked for England at younger age levels. So we're expecting a team that's going to be well set up and tactically astute and poses plenty of problems, certainly when they've got the ball.
I know it didn't please you what happened the other night. We did bring that point back. What would please you is more of how you created that goal, and the movement and the pass, and Charlie Finney's involved and Dan Ajayi in there to be back on the score sheet. That's the type of football you want. Yeah,
we'll get into those areas where Tariq was to play that pass comfortably, because we know how to get into those areas in terms of the back four and the midfielders building up to get the ball into the final third. But the hardest thing in football, as we all know, is what happens next. Creating a goal and scoring a goal from those final third areas, and we have to be better with our final pass through, and we certainly have to be better at getting more bodies in the box when we are about to cross the ball. So that's something that we're placing a great deal of emphasis on over the next couple of days leading into this game and then moving forward, because it'll improve our goal output. And if we improve our goal output, we're going to be fine, because in terms of the defensive side of things, we've conceded, fewer goals than this club has generally in terms of goals per game, and we expect that to continue. We conceded 9 in the first 8. We prefer it to be 3 or 4 in the first 8, but if you look at the balance of goals conceded across a regular season, we're on course to be pretty watertight in terms of goals against, so we've got to improve that goal output so that we certainly, you know, have an opportunity to win more games.
Back on the score sheet for Dan and Jai as well. That's his first goal coming off the flank type of thing. He scored a couple down the middle, but he'll be pleased about that, and he'll be pleased, you know, where he picked it up and finished it off. That's what you want.
Yeah, those goals please us more than any for Dan ending up in the net with the ball, which he literally did, didn't he? So yeah, that's pleasing for us because those type of goals are more frequent in football than goals from 20-25 yards out. The type of goal that Lachlan scored at Rochdale, the type of goal that Courtney scored against Northampton, they're not regular occurrences, whereas the goals where you end up in the 6-yard box are, because it happens more frequently in games of football. So we've got to make sure that our strikers are able and our attacking midfielders are able to contribute with those types of goals.